Chapter 9. Danny, said Dad later that afternoon, coming into my bedroom without even knocking. Tell me you didn't do it. Didn't do what? I asked, looking at him as if I didn't really know. You know very well what, he said, and I can tell by the expression on your face that you did it too. What on earth were you thinking of? I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, don't play the innocent, he snapped. I've just had the police at the front door, and it was all I could do to persuade them to let me, and not them, talk to you about this. Apparently Mr. and Mrs. McLean reported you for trespassing in their son's hospital room. Tell me it's not true, for pity's sake. Tell me they've got it wrong. I hung my head in shame. For a couple of moments I actually considered telling him that yes, they had got it completely wrong, that I hadn't gone anywhere near the hospital. Why would I, after all? And I could probably get Luke Kennedy to provide me with an alibi if I really needed one. But there was no way out of it. I had to come clean. It's not how it looks, I began. But he cut me off and threw his arms in the air in frustration. I don't believe it, he shouted. Don't you think we've had enough of policemen coming to this house with bad news for one lifetime? What on earth were you thinking of? What were you even doing there? I wanted to see him, I said. Sarah said that she'd like me to, and... Sarah? He asked, staring at me in surprise. Who on earth is Sarah? I've never heard you mention her before. Sarah McLean, I told him. Andy's sister. Andy's? He thought about this for a moment and sat down on the bed where he started to shake his head, laughing a little. You're friends with that little boy's sister, and you never told me this before. I'm not friends with her, I explained. At least, I didn't know her before this all started. She came here a couple of weeks ago. She came to our house. She waited outside on the street. I saw her watching me. We talked for a bit and then we met up in the park and we talked again there. And then she came by after my birthday party. I mentioned that hoping it would win me some sympathy, considering how that evening had turned out. She's nice, I added, even though I wasn't sure why I needed to tell him that. I don't care how nice she is, said Dad. She has no more business coming here than you have visiting her brother in hospital. How do you think your mother would feel if she ran into her and found out who she was? That's not a very good choice of words, I said. Don't get smart with me, said Dad, standing up and pointing a finger at me. He looked really angry now and I wished I hadn't said that. How do you think that poor boy's parents felt when you jumped out from underneath his bed? Oh, I'm sick of him, I shouted. Isn't everyone sick of him? I wish he'd just die. If he's going to die and stop... I didn't finish that sentence because Dad slapped me in the face. I blinked, amazed by what had just happened. Dad had never hit me before. I stared at him and blinked back a few tears. Danny, he said quietly, stepping back now and looking equally shocked by what he'd done. Danny, I'm sorry. I stopped listening. I closed my eyes and said nothing and waited until he left the room. I didn't want to live there anymore. The doorbell rang an hour later and I thought I was imagining things when I heard Sarah's voice downstairs. I ran down and found Dad talking to her. Danny, go back to your room, please, he said in an exhausted voice. What's going on? I asked. I came by to say I'm sorry, said Sarah, who was standing in the hallway now. Mum and Dad are going crazy with me too. They think I'm in my room, but I climbed out the window. Oh, this just gets better and better, said Dad, laughing in frustration. Sarah, I don't know what to say to you. You really shouldn't be here. If your parents discover that you're missing... They won't care, she said. All they think about is Andy anyway. Because he's in the hospital, said Dad as he ran a hand across his eyes. Of course they're going to spend all their time thinking about him when he's so sick. Can she come upstairs to my room to talk? I asked. No, snapped Dad. Absolutely not. But why not? Because she's supposed to be at home, he said. Her parents will be worried and she has no reason to be here. You two, and here he looked from one of us to the other, you two have no business being friends. Sarah, I have nothing against you personally, but But it does not help that what this family is going through having you here. Do you understand that? And it doesn't help having your family, having Danny come to visit your brother, or hiding under his bed either. Why is that so difficult for you both to understand? I just wanted to talk to him, said Sarah. I wanted to explain. Go home, Sarah, said Dad. She considered it and made a move towards the staircase, but he stepped in front of her and shook his head. Go home, he repeated. Please, just do as I ask. If Rachel comes home, don't go, Sarah, I pleaded with her. She looked up at me and shook her head. I'm sorry, she said. I better. Thank you, said Dad quietly. She turned and headed for the door. I'll call you, I shouted after her. I'll be in touch. No, you won't, said Dad. He closed the door behind her and I turned and ran back to my room. He called after me, but I didn't answer. Just locked myself in. I ran over to the window, intending to open it and call out to her on the street. When I got there, however, I saw something that made my stomach turn in jealousy. Sarah was standing at the end of the driveway, but she wasn't alone. She was speaking to Luke Kennedy, who seemed to be talking very quickly about something. In the middle of whatever he was saying, she shook her head and smiled at him, and then he started laughing. My bike was lying in the driveway and he pointed towards it, and she shook her head at whatever he had said. Then he must have said something else, because she nodded and he ran back towards his own house where I couldn't see him anymore. I frowned. I wasn't sure what was going on, but it didn't seem good. I hated the idea of the two of them talking to each other. I reached for the handle on the window to open it, but then Luke came back with his own bike. He put one leg over but didn't sit on the saddle, standing over the crossbar instead with both feet on the ground. Sarah walked towards him and held one of his arms as she climbed on behind him. He wobbled a little at first, but then took control of the bike and cycled off down the street, stopping at the end for a moment before turning right and disappearing out of sight. I didn't care. I didn't want to see either of them ever again anyway, or Dad, or Mum. I glanced at my watch. It was 7 o'clock and I could see Mum walking back up the street towards us, a carton of milk in one hand. I made up my mind. I would wait until everyone had gone to bed, and then I would run away. I waited until it was very dark, nearly 11:30 before leaving the house. Mum and Dad were both in bed and I packed a bag with a change of clothes in it and went down to the kitchen to get some biscuits and a bottle of water to take with me. I wasn't really sure where I was going. I just knew I didn't want to be at home anymore. Anyway, I was 13 years old and figured it was about time I started to make my own way in the world. David Copperfield had started a lot younger than that. I let myself out the back door and looked down the street to make sure no one was out there. Putting my bag on my back, I jumped on my bike and took off down the main road. As far as I was concerned, I was never coming home again.